In this video, we're looking at UFC 308. We're going to talk DraftKings, lineup construction, strategy, everything you need to do to be successful on this slate. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. So as always, we'll start with value plays. These are going to be your underdogs, fighters priced at 8,000 and below that you're going to need to make everything work salary-wise. There are a couple dogs that I expect to bark. But before we get into the value plays, if you haven't already, go back and watch a predictions video from earlier in the week that's linked in the description and in a pinned comment. Full card breakdown, a little bit different than this video, but let's start with these value plays. I think we're going to start right at the top of the range. At 8,000 salary, Rafael Sequeira comes in. He's fighting Ibo Aslan this week. We talked about this in the predictions video. I like Sequeira to win this fight. I think he has more ways to win. I think Ibo Aslan looked less than impressive against Anton Turkalj last time out. Turkalj went 0-4 in the UFC, cut from the promotion, finished in 3 of those 4 losses. What stood out to me in that fight, however, is that Ibo Aslan, a big power puncher, was in there landing big shots and not getting Turkalj out of there until the 3rd round, and you can argue that was an early stoppage. I know I've talked about this. I don't know if other channels are talking about it. I'm sure they are because it's impossible. It's the elephant in the room right now. The new gloves are stopping knockouts. But I say that to say this. Ibo Aslan was landing on Turkalj. Before the glove change, Turkalj was eating a lot of it. The thing about Rafael Sequeira, you go back and watch the fight. Now, you might see on his record, right? You might see all these knockouts, these finishes, but he's not somebody who's super aggressive. You go back and watch him fight, he's very patient. He sits in front of guys, he pressures, but he doesn't throw a whole lot. He likes to work the body with body kicks as well. What I think ends up happening in this fight is that he ends up winning on the scorecards. And because of his price, he needs to be in value play consideration, but I'm going to put a buyer beware tag on this fight as a whole. I don't think either man is going to be looking to get takedowns in this fight. I think it's just going to be a striking match, and I think it's actually going to be a slower pace than a lot of people think. Again, Sequeira's very patient. He's going to stand right in front of him, but he's also going to maintain a safe distance. He's going to prod with his kicks, and he's not going to take too many chances in there. He likes to wait, explode, and he'll let minutes run off the clock before he does much. And Ibo Aslan's a big, aggressive guy, but he's also got a decent chin because for what it's worth, Turkalj was catching him, but he was eating a lot of these strikes. So he's not going to give up on himself either. I wouldn't be surprised if this fight ends up going the distance and burning a lot of people on DraftKings because they see 2 big, strong, athletic finishers fighting each other right in the 8,200, 8,000 range where a lot of money is made. I think a lot of people are going to get here. I'm not saying not to, but I would recommend being underweight to the field on Sequeira and underweight to the field on this fight as a whole because let's say one of them wins by 3rd round knockout like Aslan last time out, 85 DraftKings points with 13 fights to work with, it's not going to cut it. The next value play that we're going to be looking at is Blindado. I think if he wins, it's going to be a knockout. It's probably early, although the gloves might prevent it. I do worry because a lot of money is pouring in on his opponent for whatever reason. I think that Bruno Silva is the better side here. It's not like this guy is some unknown. It's not like this guy was on this crazy long winning streak before getting re-signed to the UFC. He's a good fighter if you look at the entire world and every fighter in the world, but at the UFC level, this guy might be mid. He might be average. He went 2-2 in the UFC, 3-3 since then, and is back in the promotion. And Bruno Silva's had a rough go as of late. He gets subbed by GM3, which happens. He got GM3'd. He gassed pretty hard in that fight as well. Knocks out Brad Tavares, which is very hard to do. Brad Tavares has a crazy chin, knocked him out in the 1st round. You can argue early stoppage, but if that fight wasn't stopped, I think Blindado probably lands the strikes that puts him out. Club and sub lost to Brendan Allen. Not going to take too much away from him because that's a pretty tough fight. Lost to Shara Magomedov. Really leaned on his grappling there, but Shara was just a step ahead on the feet. He was a step ahead speed-wise as well. Against Chris Weidman, say what you want, Chris Weidman was Edward Scissorhands with the eye pokes. But like we talked about in the predictions video, this guy is fighting for a job. If he loses this week, there's no chance that the UFC keeps him. They're going to cut him before they leave the island. Dana's going to cancel his flight if he loses. He's going to make him swim back to Brazil, and I don't think he wants to take that swim. The guy's fighting for his job. I think he comes out here, throws those heavy hands, gets back to his knockout ways because the guy's a true knockout artist, and I think he could end up winning and as a result scoring a lot of points on DraftKings if it's early. If we go down, you have Bruno FAA. I know Bruno FAA has won a lot of people a lot of money on DraftKings, not against Nursultan Ruzaboyev obviously, but outside of that 109 as a dog, 117, 111, even at 9,400 last time out, 111 points, nothing to shake a stick at, but I think Abus has him covered. Petrosyan, not somebody I would want to play play either. I do think that there's a path to victory for him. In the predictions video, we said if this was on neutral ground and we weren't getting any kind of bias from a judging standpoint, that he'd probably be the side that I go with. But even if he wins, I don't think that he scores a whole lot of points. He's yet to break 81 DraftKings points. He doesn't go for a lot of takedowns. He's not knocking guys down or knocking guys out or finishing fights. So not somebody that I would be plugging in, not somebody I would want exposure to either. But below that, the Reaper. Certainly want a piece of the Reaper this week. I think that Robert Whittaker's got Khamzat Chimaev covered. I don't like to look into a whole lot of non-tape things, but it's hard not to see what's kind of going on with Khamzat Chimaev. I don't think he wants to be there. And it's been a long time since he's competed, and now he's competing in a 5-round atmosphere against a big body in Robert Whittaker. I think Robert Whittaker puts it on him. I think he finishes him late. I really don't care what he's scored in the past and how many times he's broken 100 or not broken 100. With 5 rounds to work at 7,500, getting good leverage off of a guy who's probably going to come in higher than 50% owned in most contests, Robert Whittaker's got to be a play this week, somebody who I think is a strong single entry play. I would say the winner of this fight probably ends up on the optimal lineup, and we'll talk a little bit more about who's going to end up on the optimal lineup because I think it's pretty clear for at least 2 or 3 of these fights. Below that, you got Max Holloway. I think Jerome has a shot, obviously, right? He's going to go out there, let his hands go, do what he does, show off that crazy durability, show off that crazy toughness, drag Ilia into deep water, maybe. Doesn't have as many ways to win. I think he might be at a speed disadvantage. I don't think that he's going to grapple at all in this fight, but if he's able to secure knockdowns, if he's able to knock Ilia Topuria out, maybe with a head kick, then obviously he shows up in the optimal lineup. Even in a decision win, with his volume, he shows up in the optimal lineup. Somebody you're going to want in value play consideration, but I do prefer the other side. We got a lot of fights this week, so I think we're going to have a lot of value plays. Dan Ige, I'm not at all interested. And then you've got Carlos Leal, somebody who's going to come in at super low ownership. Rinat Fakhretdinov has not looked good in his last 2 fights. He gassed and gassed hard against Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, finished that fight as a draw. Gassed and gassed hard last time out against Nicholas Dalby. Nicholas Dalby clearly won that fight. And I think that Carlos Leal has the kind of power to make him pay later in these fights, more so than both of those guys. So I wouldn't be surprised if Carlos Leal ends up springing the upset here. And down at 7,300, I don't think many people are clicking the draft player button on a guy who's making his debut on short notice against Rinat Fakhretdinov, who has scored really well in the past. And then the last guy that I want to touch on is RDA. And I had people on the predictions video tell me that it's crazy. RDA is not going to win. I'm feeling pretty damn good about RDA because when you look at the guys that he's fought recently, Mateusz Gamrot at 155 pounds, I think at this point in his career, RDA is a welterweight. Truly, he's a tweener and always has been. But now that he's older, 40 years old, don't need to be cutting that weight, brother. Just fight at 170 pounds. And they're not going to give him bums because the guy's a legend. And if they do give him bums, they're just going to get beat up. RDA is still a savage. So he's going to get decent fights, and a guy like Geoff Neal is the perfect fight for him. Geoff Neal has power, yes. Geoff Neal has shown good takedown defense throughout his UFC career, yes. Geoff Neal had a competitive fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov, although I think that gets a little bit overblown because Shavkat just runs through everybody, so then when Geoff Neal gave him resistance, people were like, whoa, watch out for Geoff Neal. But if you look at the fight, he lost the first and second round and then got finished in the third. And not only that, he was losing on the numbers about 2-1 when it comes to the striking totals. And that's one thing that I noticed about Geoff Neal. You remove this fight against Vicente Luque, against Magny, Ponzinibbio, Rakhmonov, Gary, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson if we go one step further. Like after this crazy run that he went on in the UFC to go 5-0 to start with 4 finishes, he's lost the striking numbers battle in each one of these fights except Vicente Luque. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fights. 5 of those he lost on the numbers. And you look in his last 4 fights, he's been the betting underdog. I think that people have kind of lost faith in Geoff Neal. And as a guy who has sung his praises in the past, I too have lost faith in my boy Hands of Steel. I picked him to beat Vicente Luque. I thought that he was going to be the first man to knock out Vicente Luque. And sure enough, he did exactly that. But I think that was the last great performance that we saw from Geoff Neal. That fight last time out against Ian Gary leads me to believe that he's done. And it's not because Ian Gary is some walk in the park. Ian Gary's one of the best fighters in the division. But it looked like there were moments in that fight where Geoff Neal could have pushed the pace, could have taken more chances, could have took some more minutes off the young man and won the fight. But he didn't go for it. And now he's got a legend in front of him. He might show him a little respect. Everybody knows the Wonder Boy fight where he landed as many high fives as he did significant strikes. He's a friendly guy. He's a nice guy. Against RDA, who's one of the nicest guys in the sport, I don't know if he's going to be bringing that hellacious, tenacious, gotta have it kind of mentality into this one. But we know that RDA is going to bring it each and every time. Even last time out against Mateusz Gamrot, he got controlled against the fence, got taken down and rematted over and over and over again. But when they were at space, he was cracking Gamrot. So I think that RDA gets it done. Down at 7,000, he feels like an absolute steal. And with the price of some of the underdogs on this card, we can have a lot of fun making lineups, which we'll get into right now. Before we do, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, you filthy animals. We'll start with your cash game lineups. I think if you wanted to go ahead and stack the main event, by all means, you could take Ilia Topuria, go here to max Holloway. I'm fine with that. 84.50 left over per fighter. You could start looking toward that mid-range. I think that Shara Magomedov is a great choice this week for cash. You wanted to grab a punt play down here, RDA at 7,000. Seems like a no-brainer at his price. Myktybek Orolbai is going to give you a good score at 9,100. The dude posts good scores, 108 last time out against Brenner, 123 against Uros Medic. I wish we could play Said Nurmagomedov. We know what Said Nurmagomedov was about to do. He was about to ninja choke this young man into oblivion. But anyway, 9,100 left over per fighter. You can't really go wrong here. I think grabbing Lerone Murphy is fine. I would proceed with caution with Fakhretdinov, same with Chimaev. Abus Magomedov is fine. I think that's really where you would land, somewhere between those two. Let's say we went with the Miracle, although I do think he has a tougher matchup than Magomedov does, but let's say this is where you landed for cash. I'm cool with that. We'll land on an official cash game core. We'll put that on the website in the DFS Strategy Guide of the week. You'll also get my favorite tournament plays and the must target fight for tournaments in that article as well. That can be found on kunithmma.com, linked in the description and in a pinned comment. You'll see that article post on Friday morning. But if you're watching this, everything's already been uploaded as far as data model projections go. It's all uploaded into the optimizer as well. You can get that on the site, and you can also get the official betting article. If you don't do DFS, you just do the betting, you just want the official betting article, you can grab a total access package, get that and community forum access. We had a clean sweep. We hit every bet on the official betting article last week, and we plan to keep that momentum at UFC 308. Again, linked. Do your thing, go visit the website. Now we can build some tournament lineups. It's going to be tough to get up to guys like Kennedy and Nzechukwu at 9,700. He'd have to post a really high score for you to want to play him this week, which is why I do think he comes in at pretty low ownership. I don't think too many people want to pay that price. So if you're running a lot of lineups, you want to get access to Kennedy and Nzechukwu, that makes sense. Being a slightly overweight to the field can make you different. If you're playing single entry or 3 max and you want to plug Kennedy and Nzechukwu in there, I think that's a decent way to get different as well. The matchup's perfect. Like, this is a fight that he cannot lose. And he's so much bigger and he's so much taller and he has so many more tools at range. And you know that Chris Barnett's going to get tired. You know that Kennedy and Nzechukwu is going to be kneeing him in the clinch. And now I'm kind of talking myself into him here. Let's plug him in just to see what the rest of this lineup might look like with 8,060 left over per fighter. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to start plugging away at some of these value plays. Let me grab Bobby Knuckles. Let me grab Bruno Silva. That would leave us with how much left over per fighter? 8,300. So we're probably still going to have to grab another value play. Let's grab Max Holloway just to see what this looks like. 8,750 left over per fighter. I might grab Abus Magomedov at this point with 9,100. Although I like to leave salary on the table, even if it doesn't always work. Nobody else is doing it. And getting different is the name of the game. I'd still use all the salary to play Myktybek Orolbai. Let's blow that up. Let's start anew. Farid Basharat, just to give you an idea, I'm not going to build lineups with him because I don't think that he's going to post a very high score. Farid Basharat at 9,600 just seems too expensive. Magomed Ankalaev, certainly too expensive at 9,400. We saw him break 100 DraftKings points with first round finishes over like Kutelaba twice, over Marcin Prachnio. Outside of that, does not score very well. Like even against Thiago Santos, the guy scored 80 points over 5 rounds. I fully expect him to win this week, but I don't think he's going to post a very high DraftKings score at all. Geoff Neal, I'm on the other side of. Myktybek Orolbai, you can play him this week. Lerone Murphy showed some crazy output last time out, and I think against Dan Ige, he's either going to secure a lot of takedowns or he's going to have to throw a lot of strikes. So I wouldn't be opposed to playing Lerone Murphy at 8,900 in tournaments. Renat Fakhretdinov, he's scored really well almost every time out except for the draw. And let's say he did get the nod that time, would have been 97 DraftKings points. So you definitely want access to him. Although I like Carlos Leal, I do think that Renat Fakhretdinov is a great DraftKings play. We're going to finish building this lineup, of course, course, Ilia Topuria, somebody we'd like to look at this week. Now it's 77.33 left over. We'll start building out the rest of this lineup with some of our value plays. So let's say I went with Neal. Let's say I went back to Robert Whittaker, 8,400 left over. I think that leaves us with enough for Magomedov. Sure, I will accept this. Shara, Magomedov, probably going to be somebody who's pretty popular this week. I think that he's fine. Yeah, he's more... Shara Magomedov, somebody who's going to be popular this week. If you wanted to go double Magomedov right there, I'm not mad at you. Let's say you wanted to play Sequeda. Maybe he can get a body kick finish or something like that. Come down here to Max Holloway, grab Neal. Then you can play anybody. You can come up here to a Kennedy and Nzechukwu. Blow that up, give you another look. For those of you that want to play Khamzat Chimaev, let's say you wanted to play Chimaev and Topuria. It's starting to get real chalky here with the favorites in the main and the co-main, but if they both win, there's a real good chance that they end up being on the optimal lineup. If we just want to lean into what the chalky plays of the week are, I would say that you probably would see people go here to Bruno FAA. I'd say you see people go here to Ibo Aslan at 8,200. Armen Petrosyan is somebody who I think people are pretty high on this week publicly, although it seems like a trap. Even though he's an underdog, it feels like a trap. And then at this point, Rinat Fakhretdinov. You've left no salary on the table. You've played people's favorite underdogs, a guy in Ibo Aslan that's going to be very popular this week. Rinat Fakhretdinov, somebody who's scored really highly in the past, and you're playing the two chalk favorites in the main event and the co-main event. If this ends up being optimal, then, you know, we just got to pack it up, but it's possible. Now, let's say some of you wanted to go with Chimaev. Let's say you wanted to come here to Max Holloway, kind of go the other way with some of these. You go double Magomedov there, 8,400 left over. We come down here to RDA, 9,900 left over. You can grab anybody. Let's say you grabbed Lerone Murphy, left 1,000. Nobody's doing that. So there are plenty of ways to get different this week. A lot of fights to work with. There aren't any kind of women's MMA fights on here, so you women's MMA haters, you rejoice. Although Elise Reed and Jocelyn Edwards probably ate your lunch last week. And I tried to tell them. But with no women's MMA on the card, you can feel comfortable, some of you, getting different with your lineups, making different constructions, and just kind of approaching this in a way that maybe you don't typically approach it, and try to stay away from the chalk if you can, because maybe it doesn't work this week, maybe it doesn't work next week, but eventually it's going to pay out. And that's the thing about DFS. Sometimes people look at this and think, oh, I lost DFS. Damn it. That's not what this game is. Now, if you're losing your bets over and over and over and over again, that's a problem. But DFS, it's you want to win 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6 weeks. If you're playing in a way where you want to win it all, then you're probably building lineups that are either going to lose you that 60 or win you 4,000. And if that's your style of play, if you're taking these big swings, which that's what DFS is all about, the bets can kind of offset what you're risking in DFS, because you're not going to win consistently in DFS, at least not large amounts. So just keep that in mind as you play. Don't get discouraged. Be willing to take some chances. I really appreciate you if you've made it to this point in the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, and I'll see you next week or whenever fights are. I have to look.